Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm Allie.
Good
So
to see
nice to
you.
meet you.
Alana, so
Hi,
nice
Alana.
to meet you.
How are you?
Great. Yeah, thank you so
Time.
much.
Of course. I'm nervous here.
gonna
What do you got for me?
Yeah.
Well, we have a lot to learn from you.
So we have soon to be 3 retail stores. All of our customers right now basically discover us in store, and I think like 95% of our sales are happening in store. A big initiative for us this year is to basically really blow out our e-commerce and start getting those customers that found us in store to basically be shopping online with us.
Right.
And I know you guys kind of did the opposite of that.
Yeah.
So we'd love to learn more about how that worked for you guys.
Well, it's funny. It was a total accident for us stores. So we had this e-commerce business, we were selling pants, and we put 2 fitting rooms in our lobby up front to try to get into shirts. And people started coming in, they were trying on the product, we were using it as like a testing ground, and then folks started buying product that wasn't there. They were trying it on, this is great, this fits well, and then, can I have some? We're like, okay, we can do this, we can like start selling you product that's not there. The guide shops came out of that, and we wouldn't have predicted that that would make sense. So we went, I want to say, from that little experiment to maybe 5, and then 10, now 50, and we're realizing that it's really about the power of both sides. I wish I could do it the way that you're doing it, which is start.
Why?
Well, because you've got an understanding of that interaction, and you can probably more thoughtfully and methodically than we did, like figure out how do you build the e-commerce business now that you've got the base going in terms of direct connectivity with the customer. So you can hopefully skip the era where you go out and raise $100 million plus of capital and spend that on marketing people to a site, because you've got that kernel of enthusiasm, and you've been really, it sounds like smart to me to focus on this market. The thing to, I think, figure out is how much do you want to do organically through like editorial PR, which I think is the best way to launch a brand, amazing word of mouth from the experience, versus go down the route of raising venture capital and using that to build awareness to the site. I don't know how you're thinking about that.
I mean, we started out as a shoppable digital magazine before we pivoted into brick and mortar about 2 years ago. And we experienced firsthand how hard it is to get people to your site if you don't have those marketing resources and that cash. So I think for us, like, we've definitely tried to think of creative ways to create this omni-channel customer by leveraging what we know in store and not having to throw like millions and millions of dollars against paid ads, banner ads, like things like that. I'm curious like how you kind of nurture the customer experience from in-store and online. Like, how do you connect those dots now that you do have them in both spaces?
Yeah. Well, it's fun to start in our era. We're lucky because you get to think about the customer as the individual rather than the store, right? Because back in the day, it was like, how's Austin doing today? Or, you know, how's Broadway doing? And it wasn't really about an individual who, they don't think about it that way. They think about, oh, I love this brand. You know, I love Bonobos or I love Bolton. And they're gonna figure out how to engage regardless of, you know, the channel. So I would say, you know, adopt a mindset that isn't about, here's our web business, here's our store business. It's all about how do you activate that person who's already coming through and who's engaged and get them on the digital side and letting that snowball. And I think that's a better approach than figuring out how do we buy traffic here?
Right.
Because you've got that kernel of enthusiasm.
Right.
And this is generally, I think, something that we get wrong with venture-backed retail is it's okay for things to start gradually and build momentum, right? And with that focus on New York, I wouldn't overthink, let's go market and spend a lot of advertising dollars to get people to the site now that you've got the stores going. I would figure out how do we take people that love this and get them to be more deeply engaged regardless of where they're interacting.
So basically, what would be the best way then to convert the physical brick and mortar customers over to our e-commerce business?
I mean, the very best way is to sell them something, right? Because then they bought it, they're engaged. If they don't like it for some reason, there's a customer service interaction. You've got their email, you know they like it. I think what's harder is what do you do with the people who come in, they're checking it out, but then they're gone. And I think there's some interesting things you can do there. You know, we've done some experiments, but having a bag, having a catalog in a bag, like having something for them to leave with where they can later interact again with the brand. I think it's hard to do, but if you can capture email if there's an authentic way to do it, right? The last thing someone wants is like, hey, welcome. Can we have your email? It's like, who? No.
Yeah.
But if there's any kind of a way to figure out from the interaction, like, hey, can we follow up with you? You know, fill in the blank, and you can capture that email address. That's huge. We tend to be a little bit less hands-on about it. I'm not sure that we do an aggressive job because we don't want people to feel that
they're
like
being
we're trying
sold.
to
Yeah.
convert them. So I'm actually a big believer that the best way to get them to come back is for them to have an awesome, authentic human interaction while they're there, which they will remember, and if they like it, when they see the brand again or when they pop in, that experience is the best way to get them later versus anything formal, you know,
Right.
any hacks or tactics.
Right.
So if it's all about the human experience, how do you hire your retail staff, your guides? Like what makes a good guide? What are you looking for?
It's an awesome question. So the way we thought about it was, let's go to places that we admire in terms of the customer experience, not necessarily trying to find people with the exact right men's apparel experience, but the actual human experience. So the first thing I thought about was Apple. The second thing I thought about was Lululemon. The third thing I thought about was, let's think out of the box, whether it's JetBlue or someone who has an amazing reputation for great interpersonal inner skills from a sales role where there was some mission-driven element to it. And so, you know, one of my favorite guide shop leaders that we have is a guy named Sam who ran our Armored Street guide shop and now is one of our regional managers. And he was in the Air Force, right? And then went from the Air Force to someone, he was door-to-door selling knives or something like that. So, you know, if you've sold door-to-door and, you know, can deal with people being like, get out of here,
Right.
and come up through the military, and it's a certain sense of, you know, however you want to think about that, integrity, ethics, and work, you know, determination. Well, that's one of our best people. I don't think most men's apparel retailers talk about a leader who came from the Air Force and door-to-door selling of knives. So you got to think outside of the box around what kinds of human beings are going to be really great in terms of empathy and energy, who don't come from the industry being retail, and then within the industry and retail, not necessarily looking for physical product experiences that you admire, but service experiences that you admire, and then hiring from there. And you can just feel it when you're with someone. So I used to think, when I'm out, who actually just delivers great service regardless of where I am? And I'd be like, hi, I don't know if you know about Bonobos. They'd be like, what? They're like, well, I'm sure you love it here, but just in case you don't, you know, here's my card.
I'm gonna poach you.
Yeah, and just meeting people who are delightful, and we've all had that experience where our expectations are low, and if someone meets them, we're like, okay, cool. And if someone exceeds them, you're like, wow, I'm going back there.
Right.
And you want that for every single person that works, you know, on the front lines. You actually want it for everyone at your company, but.
What do you do when you feel like someone hasn't properly represented the brand? Or like, what are the signals that your gut impression of someone may not actually be the way that they end up transacting with people in store?
So this is one of the hardest things to figure out in the early years is how do you actually fire on culture, right? Because you might have someone who's good at what they do in terms of performance, but if they're not a fit with the culture of the company that you're building and they're not leaving people with the, and generally in retail it's pretty straightforward, which is like the performance and the culture tend to go hand in hand. But you have to have the courage to say, you know, thank you. Like this isn't working out. You got to do it the right way. You don't want to blindside people. You want to give folks a chance to see if they can take feedback. But you got to have the courage to say, this is a precious resource that you have. You know, what you're building. You can't really be getting any positions wrong, like thank you, and then try to be generous on the way out with folks. You know, good notice, as generous of severance as you can give in this position. And then what I find is most helpful is become a relentless recruiter on behalf of the people who are leaving. Go help them. Because if you didn't hire the right person, that's on you too. So take accountability for it and be that reference that they need. Help them think through what's next. And the more you build the muscle of being like, okay, it's okay that people get fired. It's part of the world. Like, this is something that we need to get good at as leaders and build that muscle. That's then going to give you so much freedom to, over time, get it right and reveal the culture by having phenomenal people who embody it.
I mean, it's been interesting to see, you know, with our extreme focus on the brick and mortar stores, how much brand awareness and I think brand love we've been able to build with our customer base. And that kind of goes against a lot of what we're seeing in the industry right now, like this hubbub about the retail apocalypse and the death of brick and mortar. And I feel like Bonobos was really one of those first players that kind of said, we don't care, like this is relevant and this is relevant to our brand. So where was your head at that time where you kind of decided to take that risk into brick and mortar when a lot of brands, that's right when they started closing up shop and closing hundreds of brick and mortar spaces a year?
Yeah, it's a great question. The world's a funny place. We like simple narratives, right? Like, stores are bad, e-commerce is exciting and good. And I bought into that for a while. I kind of drank my own Kool-Aid on, the future really is digital, and therefore let's focus on that entirely. And then you wake up one day and you're like, actually 90% of clothing is still sold in person.
Right.
90% is a lot. And so where's it going? Like, if 90% is going to zero, okay, then maybe we shouldn't focus on that. I happen to believe there's no chance it's going to be any different than, call it 50-50 in terms of where we end up. And people say, well, it's all one transaction, it doesn't matter where it happens. It's like, no, it actually matters. The transaction has a physical location when it's happening and a way that it's happening, and that can be on a mobile device, it can be on a website, it can be in person, whether or not the goods are fulfilled at that point in time or not, right? And maybe at some point we'll be talking to something and that'll be another way to buy stuff, but there are both ways that are very different, but the customer wants to be able to do all of it. And so why would we exclude what currently is 90% if we're trying to build something great? And so I think it really more comes down to what's your real estate strategy for where are people still gonna be? And how do you kind of aim at the future? And you're in a place with this market in New York where it's the #1 pedestrian city in the country, arguably the world. There's always gonna be opportunity for people who are walking by to discover something. You're picking neighborhoods that are incredible, expensive. I don't know how you're doing that.
It's our business model.
Smart, right? So you get what you pay for in life, part of which includes foot traffic. And as a result, you're going to be able to build buzz and cachet. And I think that's like a cool way to do it. Like, this is a lifestyle, world that we live in.
Yeah.
That's how we used to do stuff. And I think if you can mind meld the old with the new in terms of how do we now play offense digitally, which it sounds like you're starting to think about, that's the best of both worlds.
On the expansion side, that's like a big thing that we're trying to figure out this year. We have, Nolita, Williamsburg, soon to be Union Square. We want to do one more store this year. I know you don't know a ton about the business, but where do you think the fourth store should be? Like, we've talked about New York, we've talked about like opening a new city.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say, should we do LA? For some reason I thought you were going to say that, but it sounds like, well, you're from LA. So.
I'm from LA, but I think for
LA's
us,
tough.
LA's tough, and having lived there my whole life, my whole teenage life, and I lived there briefly in 2015 as well. I think you really have to open a store that exists as an explicit destination that people want to drive to, wait in traffic for.
That's right. All right, I got it.
Yeah.
Armitage Street in Chicago in Lincoln Park.
Chicago.
I'm biased, but super biased because that's my hometown, but actually that was one of our first guide shops. And I think like a few years ago I took a picture of the street and I did a nerdy little Instagram that said, one day they will say the digital revolution went offline on Armitage Street between Sheffield and Halstead, because like Bonobos went in and then Warby Parker followed us there, and then you have like Marine Layer and Interior Define, and it seems like everyone on that stretch. And then if you read about it, it is the largest population of, I think the term is DINK, double income, no kids.
I've never heard that. The dinks.
Anywhere, and they're like walking around, and then of course you have people with kids walking around, so it's just enormous foot traffic discovery on Saturdays and Sundays. I don't know if that will be consistent with your brand, but something like that, that's like a great neighborhood, great foot traffic, and to get a test outside of New York.
Yeah.
If you have the ability, if the focus is like, we're here, I mean, I will put it to you, what would be the fourth location in New York?
We were thinking of the Upper West Side. Like, we have a large cohort of our customer base is college age, and so kind of putting a bulletin space smack dab in the middle of a college campus feels really attractive to us as an expansion strategy.
Okay.
I think Upper East could work too.
Upper East Side. But we haven't really toyed with any other ideas besides
That would
heading
really be
uptown.
it for New
Yeah.
York, yeah.
Totally.
And then we think maybe being somewhere on the East Coast so we're not flying back and forth like at this stage would be
Yeah.
ideal. Just something to make it a little bit easier operationally.
Yeah, there's something to the power of focus. We don't necessarily need to get too in neighborhoods, but we don't even have a Bonobo store on the Upper West Side because it's actually hard. The math is hard up there because you've got a lot of your population, but you don't have the exact same dynamics on
Right.
foot traffic,
Right.
except you're gonna be like Lincoln or, you know. So for your model though, it could be totally different, in which case that's interesting. The Upper East Side, there's two things about it. One is just super expensive, but you're solving for that, it sounds like. It's also stage of what's the right time for that in the development of a brand. Because it's like a different dynamic.
Yeah, it
And so
means something
you gotta balance like the foot traffic, the investment, and then what kind of a statement you're trying to make about what the brand's about. Like Nolita to the Upper East Side within a
We
year
did
and a half.
Nolita a year ago.
Yeah, that's fast. But maybe that's awesome because you're basically saying, look, we're about, you know, discovery for lots of different kinds of people.
So how did you kind of break away from exclusively targeting this young, hip male with the Bonobos brand?
It's so fun, this topic. Because when we got going initially, it was kind of pigeonholed as a young man's brand.
Yeah, that's how I initially
That's
saw
how
it.
it
And
started.
over the years, I think you've done a really good job of kind of expanding that.
Well, the partnership with Nordstrom was huge in that regard. So we did a partnership with them, and we ended up really amplifying the range. And I have a funny story. I was in a Bonobos guide shop launch in Bethesda, Maryland, and this father-son came up to me. And the son was probably like 20, father was maybe like 50. So I like addressed them both, and I was like, "How did you hear about Bonobos?" to the son. And he was like, I'm here because of my dad. And I'm like, oh, okay, got it. Hi, like, how did you hear about Bonobos? And he was like, well, I was at Tyson's Corner at the Nordstroms, and I asked, what are your best chinos? And they were like, try this Bonobos stuff. And they're like, it's actually pronounced Bonobo. I was like, oh, interesting. And then how'd you hear about the guide shop? He's like, well, I went online because I wanted to buy some more, and I came to your site. I was like, yes, this is how this is supposed to work.
Yeah.
And then I'm on your email list, and you guys emailed when you were launching the guide shop, and so here we are. And so I think you're smart to be thinking about like, how do we widen the aperture of the lens? And I don't think it hurts that you're starting, you know, for lack of a better way to say it, like young and cool, because that's it's like an easier place to go across the whole range in that regard. So it's good to dream big on what that looks like. I don't think you have to go after it right away.
Yeah.
You know, you don't necessarily need to, like, that position can unfold over years and years. The opportunity is going to be there. You don't need to like try to solve for it yet.
Right.
It kind of ties back to the real estate decision though, which is
Right.
like, okay, if you want to imprint and prove that out now, okay, that's like a good experiment to run, is to have like Nolita and Upper East Side running at the same time and see
Right.
how that goes.
Do you feel like because you took venture money, you were kind of forced to look into these other verticals or other age groups more quickly than you would have wanted to? Like, I guess I'm curious like how your vision was affected or influenced by having venture money.
Yeah. So take whatever pressure you may feel now, which probably is like meaningful. You want to do well.
I'd say it's there.
It's meaningful.
Tangible.
And then just pile millions of dollars on top of that. It's sort of like, I'm not sure if it's, because it's already hard, I'm not sure if it's any different. It does change the pace and the expectation of how fast you need to build something big. And I think depending on how you approach it, it can create bad behavior, right? It can also unlock different
Awesome
ideas.
behavior.
Yes. So it's all about your judgment and this strange and difficult dance between focus and experimentation. So I do think you take something like the guide shop, going back to that, when we saw that was working, we had capital on hand to go say, let's go build 5 to 10 of these,
Right.
and let's see how that goes, right? And we went to Armitage in Chicago, and we did a 3rd story on Newbury Street in Boston, and it was like, well, 3 stories is a long way to walk for someone new off the street. And so next thing we knew, we had 5 stores, and we had perspective that came from that. That's a good thing. The flip side is, you know, you go and we've done some funny stuff over the years, like we've made some other brands, and we built a technology office, and things that took us a little bit further afield from the core. And those were a little bit scarier because those were things that had we not had the capital to try it, we would have been constrained.
Right.
But I'll take ownership for those. Like sometimes you have delusions about what you can do that are in fact delusions, and then sometimes they end up accurate.
Right.
So I think it's a very, very idiosyncratic decision to the pace at which you want to do this, the kind of company you want to build. And some of the great companies come up as totally bootstrapped. Some raise a ton of equity. Some are bootstrapped and then later raise equity. What do you think?
I mean, so we've raised a $3 million seed round, like closed it like last year. We'll probably raise our A in January. And I mean, I think because of our model and because of this co-retailing piece, like we have this opportunity to scale really quickly, and the stores are profitable almost immediately. So, I mean, right now it makes sense, but like you definitely hear the horror stories of direct-to-consumer brands getting killed.
Totally. Yeah, and there's some good ones too. The seed round, who did you raise from?
Kleiner, YC, A4 Capital, Flybridge, Notation, Tim Draper,
Great.
Kevin Hale.
And did you make a board or not at this stage?
Not yet, it's just us.
Okay.
You're looking at it. So yeah, I mean, we're like on track to do that, and I think there's a ton of interest from all of our inside investors. It's just like, are we definitely gonna do that?
Yeah, and I think we still have a lot to learn and figure out. Obviously, our co-retailing model applies to various verticals and various customers, not just a millennial female and these female-led, female-forward brands. And so there is this question of, with our co-retailing learnings and genuinely thinking that this is the future of the genuinely thinking that this is the future of retail, this notion of space sharing and kind of bringing the sharing economy into retail.
Right.
This is something that we could execute with different concepts and apply our retailing model to other customers, other product categories. So it also is kind of a question of, do we want to do that, or do we kind of want to stick with this customer and these product categories and what we're doing now, which we're seeing a lot of success with.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
I remember it can be so many things, right? I got great advice once. I know you don't have a board, but I love this, which is just pretend. At some stage you'll have one. You'll have these people advising you. It sounds like you raise some more money. If you don't listen to your board, you might get fired. If you do listen to your board, you definitely will. Right? And it's like a fun way of saying always trust yourself. No one's going to be as close to this. And that really fun dance between focus, experimentation, wait, could this be right? It's going to be really about your intuition.
Right.
And then going for it. And you're going to get, by definition, some things wrong and some things right. But if you're not getting some things wrong, that's a problem because it doesn't mean you're like taking enough risk.
Yeah.
So it's a really, really fun stage that you're at. I can't tell you how impressed I am by what you're building. This stage is so fun.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for spending time today. It was so great to be with you.
It was great to
Good
meet
luck.
you too. Thank
thank
you for
you for your
everything.
time.
So nice meeting you.
So great to meet
Thanks
you.
so much.
Thank you again.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Andy.